Listeners dipped a bit for our last podcast.
Well, there weren't any Daleks in it.
Yeah, perhaps we're not distinctive enough. Remember that review about us sounding like 4 Guardian readers?
How can we make sure listeners can tell us apart?
Oh, I know. We could wear different coloured sashes.
Brilliant. Except we're an audio-only podcast.
Wait a minute. Doesn't one of us sound exactly like David Mitchell?
That's Paul, and he's not in this one.
Okay. Well, look, what we need then are some diverse voices.
Well, oddly enough, I just received an offer from the 3 hosts of the hit podcasts, 2 Oods and the Sensorites, to join us as guests.
Oh, I've not heard of them. What do you think?
Well, they say they sense we need some help, and they have oodles to say.
Oh, great. Dial him in.
Thank you for allowing us to serve your audience, dudes.
We are thrilled with this opportunity. It's really good.
2 Oods. And I guess you must be a Sensorite.
Not just any Sensorite. When you address one of the elders, you call him Sir.
Anything else would be rude.
You wouldn't want to be booed.
In that case, welcome, sir.
We have successfully infiltrated this podcast and can now proceed with the elimination of its human hosts.
We can hear you, you know.
If you didn't use your telepathic communicator, you should.
That's killed the mood.
Perhaps you should just leave us now?
Damn it! That's the 3rd podcast this week.
And 2 of them sued.
Can we sing our song before we go?
No, we did a musical number last time.
Understood.
Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed, that sketch, to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast episode 95, where this time we're looking at 2 stories involving those bald-headed near-neighbours from the Spheres. Initially we'll look at First Doctor story The Sensorites from Season 1, and later we'll examine 10th Doctor adventure Planet of the Ood from Series 4. And with me to decide whether these stories are sensational or have left us feeling a bit sensitive, I have a star-studded panel, starting with Something Who's own science correspondent Giles. So, hello Giles.
Evening.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got some astronomical observations to make.
I'm not so sure, but yes, nice rockets.
Yeah. Very good. And back for a 3rd time, it's Lego modeler and 2024's podcast breakout sensation, Rick.
Hey.
Well, good evening, everybody. Lovely to be back.
Yeah, and great to have you fresh from your appearance on the Library of Impossible Things.
Yes, Cy Hart, who's an absolute delight to speak to, perhaps made me ramble on a bit more than I was intending on my history of fandom, but I've survived and to tell the tale, and here I am.
Great. We missed him beyond measure, but finally back in our ranks is the multi-talented 3D artist, writer, researcher, podcaster and co-creator of Dalek 63 to 88. It's Gav Rymil.
Hooray! It's me. I'm back.
Yeah.
Lucky people.
Yeah.
Is this podcast going out before the 18th of May?
Well, it depends how good I am at editing, but probably.
Well, Riverside Studios, 18th of May. Three Doctor Who. There's a TV show called Doctor Who, and they're showing 3 films, unrestored film prints of the Dalek Invasion of Earth, Planet of Decision, The Chase, and Death to the Daleks. And I will be on stage with Mr. James Goss, introducing those, telling you fun facts, things to watch out for, and such like. So, if this podcast comes after that date, then
you missed it.
That will be a pretty pointless waste of 2 minutes. Well done, everyone. I'm sure you'll edit it out, Richard.
Well, I wouldn't be so sure about that. And since it's that time of the year again, making his annual special guest appearance, it's Missing Episodes podcaster and celluloid aficionado, Tim.
Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Yeah.
I was disappointed. I was expecting you in your introduction, Richard, to adjust the title of the podcast. So when you do your little rhyme, something old, something borrowed, I thought you were going to end it with something ood. And I expected you to be there. Yeah. So if you want to re-record that before we go out, just a suggestion, from one podcaster to another, up the ante.
To make
I'm so sorry. I'm
something
in an obnoxious mood. There you go.
Well, go on.
No, hello. How are you doing?
Splendid. I mean, I dream about having a panel of this quality. So it's lovely to see you all.
It's nice to be back. I'm in a wrong environment.
A dream to some and nightmare to others, didn't someone once say?
Gavin, I am definitely going to go to the Riverside / went to the Riverside to see you and James guys introduce those Dalek stories.
I'm looking forward to it / how was it for you?
It was great.
Brilliant.
We're joking about time. It's great. Yeah, good. Rick, can I ask you a question?
You certainly can.
Because I follow you on X.
Yes.
About your Lego. It's amazing. So, if you're setting out to do, say, the Tricolor Cafe from Evil of the Daleks, is it trial and error, or is there an element of design? In either case, it's amazing, and I don't know how you do it, because my abode here is full of Lego, but I have a nervous breakdown whenever I try to do anything off grid, that doesn't follow the instructions precisely. So how do you do it? I want to know.
Well, let's start with, I'm glad you picked the Tricolor Cafe, because the trigger for that was Gav's article in DWM.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
I'd never given that cafe the second thought. It's in 2 grubby telesnaps.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in Doctor Who magazine is this bonkers 60s cafe. And there were a number of things appealed to me about it. One was that it was in red, white and blue, and most of my Doctor Who models end up being beige or grey or whatever. And secondly, it was all diagonals, and Lego doesn't necessarily do that well. So it was a challenge of a build.
You could have built it at a 45-degree angle.
I could have done, yes. Gravity then comes into effect, unfortunately, even for Lego.
Gravity.
So you do, well, I anyway build like I did when I was a kid. It's just a big tub of Lego, and it's all trial and error, simply put. And sometimes there's an element of the scene, you can see a Lego piece that's your starting point, and you just build furiously around that.
Yeah.
But with a lot of, particularly 60s and 70s Who, those production teams were just building quick anyway. And so it's quite boxy. That works well with Lego. They reuse stuff, and I disassemble my models. I reuse stuff.
Yeah.
Those kind of wooden panelled walls that are on lots of my sets, they are the same wooden panel wall. I just rip them off. The image of the Fendal corridor becomes the backdrop for the ships in Enlightenment, and they become the in the Village of the Angels, the house that they're barricaded in that. So it's just a lot of reuse of stuff, and that's how I turn from doing one model, which is a reasonably sensible thing for a grown-up to do, and wake up years later having done literally hundreds of Doctor Who scenes. There's a lot of cheating and reuse, and
it's
but
very
fun along the
accomplished,
way,
and it's so nicely photographed, and it's a lot of fun, and it lends itself really well to the subject, I think. Interestingly, there's someone on Twitter who recreates and keeps threatening to recreate episodes using Lego style animation, and I find that really appealing because you sort of know what you're dealing with, and it works. And in an age where everyone's struggling to find some more successfully than others, the best way to recreate a missing episode. That Lego medium really works.
The interesting thing is there are quite a few people who are sort of specialising in Lego Doctor Who models. I love them all. It's not a competition. It's a fantastic way to share your love of the show. But like you say, there are people who do animations. There are people who computer render their models. They have a very different building style. And I love it when somebody tries the same model that I have. I've seen half a dozen Wotan war machines, and perhaps because they're doing it on computer or they have different brick selections to me, their mind interprets that in a very different way. And it's lovely to see how people's minds work in terms of doing something very similar to what you're doing. So I kind of embrace the dozen people who are playing around with Lego to, as I say, express their love for the show.
Is there, not to make this the Lego podcast, but I'll hand it back to Richard in 45 minutes or so. Is there such a thing as like modelling software with Lego?
Yes, there is. And Lego have provided open source sort of CAD style Lego programs, and that allows you to create things like instructions that you can share with people or monetize if you want to do so.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm still building like I was 6 years old is this is my release from sitting in a Teams environment all day with work and not wanting to look at a screen, wanting a breakout from that. And so I'm very much an old school Lego builder, but I'm happy to embrace people who are building in different ways, and computer software is one of them.
Brilliant. Well, Gav's very much the same, because when we were preparing for this podcast, Gav sent me some photographs of a Lego model of one of the Whitechapel murder sites. So,
Yeah.
I think it lends itself to Doctor Who better, but there you go.
It's so good, that Whitechapel set. It's so good.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for indulging me.
No problem.
Yeah. And I guess just before we move on, the other thing that I've seen recently, Gav, that I thought really enhanced my understanding of what was going on was on the season 15 Blu-ray set, the Horror of Fang Rock making of those the models of the sets there that you did with Reese, wasn't it?
Anthony Lambo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did the bulk of that. I did most of the crew quarters and the crew room, which you pretty much don't see on the Blu-ray, unfortunately. I think it would be nice if once the exclusivity of the Blu-ray has waned a bit, which it probably has by now, I think we should do a nice 3D walkthrough and just stick that on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to see in that 3D environment. And yeah, I like with Andrew Orton's brilliant stuff that he's doing at the moment, I just love seeing those sets laid out in studio as the actors saw them. It gives you a real insight into the technicalities and the difficulties. And one of the things that's really interesting is you don't appreciate how they had to plan the camera moves, not just in terms of blocking the actors in those environments and all the normal things you think of are going to be issues, but the camera moves that you can't have because you start to thread the camera cables into knots. And that was something I never appreciated, is you sometimes look at those studio plans and you think, well, the obvious thing would be to move that camera from there to there. But what you realise is because it's already gone from A to B to C and created a triangle, it can't go back in a certain direction because then it will overlap and tie it in a knot. And just all of these other little nuances that you don't appreciate. And you see how actors had to get from A to B in a given amount of time. Yeah.
I wouldn't have believed quite how tight a space it was. It doesn't look that small when you see it on the screen, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Gav's done a good chunk of episode 1 of The Wheel in Space with Reese.
Yeah, that was Reese's model.
3D modelling the set from the telesnaps. Am I right, Gav? Because there are no floor plans.
Yeah.
And then using the camera script to place the actors in the set and then putting some basic animation in there of the characters, and it is astounding. So again, in an era when everyone's arguing about the best way to recreate a missing episode, that Wheel in Space thing is the best thing I've ever seen. It's astounding. I could watch it as is, without the refinement of the characters.
I appreciate that.
It's really great.
And it's a lot
You
of
just
fun.
need to pull your finger out and finish it.
Yeah, I do.
It's on Gav's Patreon.
Yeah, go and look at my Patreon. We're also in the great tradition of something who I've got a little visual thing to show you. You're going to be able to see this. Well, you are. The people at home aren't.
Ooh.
I can see it. Yeah.
Ooh.
Gosh,
It,
you're
we allowed to say what it
pushing
is?
that. Wow.
You can if you want, yeah.
well, I'm hoping it's the Highlanders.
It is, yeah. You can send people.
Oh, then
over
I
to
could
it.
see it.
Yes. Phew.
I can't get my camera to adjust. There you go. Just go. Another little piece of software, another little software tool has come available, and it's just every time I start to investigate one software tool that might help me reanimate the telesnaps. Well, that fella shouldn't have vanished at the end, should he? Something newer and quicker and easier comes out.
It's been hotly debated on socials, hasn't it?
That's amazing.
What do you do with telesnaps to animate them? And I think, Gav, credit to you, is I think that's that human touch that identifies how far and in what way can I stretch this telesnap image and it still work for a human viewer. And I think with some of them that use technology to a far greater extent, that's lost. That human judgment that says, "Oh, that's just been stretched a bit too far," has been lost. So
The thing
all credit, Gav. The things I've seen that you've had a hand in, absolutely are convincing. Just brilliant.
Thank you. What I'm doing over on my Patreon, little plug there, I want to just animate all of the telesnaps, and that will leave big gaps in the narrative. But I want to animate the telesnaps to bring back moments that are lost as authentically as possible. I'm less bothered about trying to tell the whole episode as a sequence of talking photos, because I think we can experience the episodes more effectively with like the narrated audios. If you want to understand the storyline, if you want to understand the plot, then the narrated audios are wonderful. If you want to see moments in time, then the telesnaps give us that. So I'm trying not to do, as you say, I'm trying not to stretch those moments. I'm trying to isolate the exact moment each telesnap was taken and just bring those to life and not continually recycle them throughout the episode and not throw forward to before a telesnap was taken, for instance.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved the little trailers that you did to support the Missing Episodes podcast. So
Thank
bring
you.
that in as a plug.
Thank you.
But it looks like the things that you've been posting on Twitter over the last couple of weeks, a real step forward even from that.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you're getting better and better results?
I do, and also it's quicker. I mean, the stuff I did for the Missing Episodes trailers are smoother, but they were a lot more time consuming. This new software, it does this really extraordinary thing, not always 100% effectively, but it will take a 2D photo and map it very convincingly over a 3D shape. So you can give it just their face. And there's a bit in one of those clips I just showed you where the doctor nods his head, and it has just worked out perfectly what the top of his head looks like when he looks down to nod. And previously, that was all stuff that required manual intervention to build and animate the top of the head myself. So again, this software has its downsides, but yeah, it's a big leap forward, and I'm just going to keep plodding on, and as new stuff comes available, I'm just going to apply it to whatever is next, the next telesnap in my sights, until I've done a complete set of 70 telesnaps for the Highlanders episode 1, and then I will move on to episode 2.
Yeah, I particularly liked the Hannah Gordon, Annika Wills one you just showing us. That sort of felt quite naturalistic.
Thanks. Yeah. It's because it uses motion capture. I'm listening to the audio repeatedly to try and hear what we're missing. Like the scene where Polly says, "Oh, it's the English. Well, that's all right then." And then Hannah Gordon Kirsty says, "Oh, do you want to get us killed?" And it's stupid of me because we've got the camera scripts. I should, always check the camera scripts. But it became obvious that Polly was going, "Oh, if it's the English, that's all right then." And I thought, well, she obviously stands up at that moment and probably maybe waves to them or does something. and Hannah Gordon says, "Do you want to get us all killed?" And
Yeah.
pulls her out, pulls her down, pulls her off.
Brill. Okay. Well, let's get on with the business of tonight. So let's start with The Sensorites, written by Peter R. Newman and directed initially, episodes 1 to 4, by Mervyn Pinfield and then by Frank Cox for the last couple. As a fan of a certain age, all I knew of The Sensorites was page 42 of the Doctor Who monster book, a mixed bag of monsters, a photograph of two Sensorites, not even, only above the waist, I think, in the photo, and a paragraph in The Making of Doctor Who by Terence Dix. Well, I mean, quite a good synopsis, quite a thorough synopsis. But yeah, but that was kind of it. I didn't read the Target book, which came out in 87. So probably until I saw it in the late 90s on UK Gold, we're talking best part of 25 years. That's what I knew of the story. So came to it quite late. I don't know what it was like for others. I
read the Target book when I was young, and I have pretty strong and fond memories of the chicanery and the intrigue. Yeah, the UK Gold was a pretty strong memory as well. But what really kind of defined this, or my feelings towards this story, was when I went on holiday in the mid-2000s. I don't know when the DVD came out, that would date it. But I went on holiday to Mallorca, and it was a fairly grim place that we stayed at, and the sink was blocked, and I was feeling a bit homesick, and the place stank, and it was all a bit weird. But I had taken the Sensorites on DVD, thinking I'll just have something to do, and I watched an episode every morning in Mallorca with my cereal in this otherwise dreadful environment, and it became a very fond rediscovery of the story. I think serialized is the way to view this story. Not necessarily in a smelly foreign flap.
Serialized literally over breakfast.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I remember being quite intrigued by it when I would have read the original archive feature for it back in Doctor Who Weekly issue 9.
Oh, yes.
Issue 9, as I've just checked. It was a special monster issue, it says. Sensorite Zygons and Lizard Men, and possibly telling me they put the Zygons on the front cover. But I remember being quite intrigued by it, but I don't recall reading the novelisation. I'm trying to think when I would have first seen this. I must have seen it on a hooky copy at some point in the probably early 90s or so. But then I don't think I really owned it until the DVD came out, which is 2012. I think so.
Are you just making a liar out of me about my mid-2000s Mallorca story? Thanks for that.
Oh, sorry. VHS? No, VHS was late, wasn't it?
And it wasn't Mallorca.
I touched
It was
a
the
donkey
Wirral
on that holiday.
Still could be the Wirral. Go on, Rick.
I was very late to it. The DVD would have been my first watch of it, and it would have been one of those slightly unattractive DVDs that I would stick on birthday and Christmas lists so that I didn't get socks or a jumper or something totally awful, bottle opener. So yeah, came to it late, and after a slightly shaky one-off watch of the Sensorites, as we're going to discuss, it's sort of grown on me quite significantly since then.
We're all in danger of showing our hand quite early, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Telepathically, at least.
Tim?
In the late 1980s, I was off sick from school, and for some reason I was, some sort of change of scene. I remember being in my parents' bed during the day, and my mum brought me from Bolton Library hardbacks of the Gunfighters the Celestial Toymaker, and the Sensorite.
Ooh.
And I read them all, and I can't remember a thing about the Sensorites. I'm not judging it. It's just strange that I remember reading being immersed in both the Gunfighters and the Celestial Toymaker, not the Sensorites. And then I think it was perhaps the less but one Classic Who I watched on my return to being interested. Around when was season 2? Series 2 broadcast?
06.
06, yeah.
Around then, I watched it. I wasn't even sure whether it existed or not. I was sort of, it exists, I'll watch it. And then I was convinced in my head from when I was a kid it was a 4-parter. And it wasn't. So I was wrong on all fronts. So I watched it in 06. And then I bought the DVD when that came out. And then, I've watched it quite regularly since.
I'd venture to suggest it would have made an excellent 4-parter, but I mean, I guess you could probably say that about most of the 6-parters. Yeah,
you can. It's sort of a easy criticism to make of practically every 6-parter, probably. Not the longer ones, not the ones longer than that, funnily enough. But yeah, so I'm not going to do that.
Good.
I'm going to rewrite it later on. I've got some polishes which I think would make it.
Excellent.
See if we've got the same notes.
My memories of this were that it had a brilliant first episode and then it got worse after that. And on this rewatch, I think I felt like I was wrong on all counts as far as I was concerned.
Isn't that a coincidence? Because my memory had it was one episode in the rocket.
Yeah.
And then 5 episodes on the planet.
Yeah.
And I was expecting that. So to find out that, in fact, they don't go down to the planet until episode 3 was a surprise, which is strange because I've watched it, maybe 4 times or so, 5 times. Real surprise. My memory played... I also thought that... Oh, goodness me. What's the character called who's grey-haired?
John.
Thank you. I also thought that John...
A memorable name they gave him.
I was expecting him to get cured extremely quickly. And that doesn't happen until episode 5? So it's just funny that I've got such a takeaway from it that I think my impression going into it was that it was one snappy episode at the start and then 5 sort of dreary episodes of Sensorite scheming. But paying attention to it properly this time and watching it and getting into it, I had a completely different experience. So that was terrific. A different experience because all of my presuppositions were utterly false.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Shall we start at the beginning?
Go on, then.
Go on.
Because what I was going to say was there's almost a separate start to this story, which is the scene in the TARDIS, which separates the plot of the Sensorites, is hugely reflective, introspective. And I find it interesting every time I watch it, but particularly if I'm in a kind of a season 1 rewatch, re-listen. And whilst it's character driven, it's the TARDIS team that are saying these things, it feels like the production team are taking a deep breath and saying, well, what are we going to do with this? Where are we at with this as a television programme? And they literally list the episodes to date for the benefit of the audience. They talk about how the team are getting along together, how they are changing as part of these experiences. They're questioning, Barbara questions whether there's any point leaving the ship at all in certain locations. The Doctor is impressing on them his reason to be as a mystery solver. They start the process of, for the benefit of Big Finish many decades later, of introducing unfilmed adventures as casual references. There's the whole Henry VIII.
Yeah.
There's 3 in this story.
Yeah. Go for it, Gav.
The planet Nesto with the psychic plants, and Beau Brummel, I think, is the third.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That's right. So my opening question is, where is the series at, do we feel, at this point in time? It's trying to do something very different every week. And what makes the Sensorites exciting is it's yet another attempt to do something very new with the show.
Mm. And yet, this essentially becomes the template for the show. This is the first time the Doctor interjects and says, I'll come and help. I'll come and sort your problems out. The list of firsts that we now take for granted that come from this story, I mean, notwithstanding the fact that Time Lords all turn out to be telepathic, that's a sort of first, but it's a bit of a fluke. But we get our first alien planet seen in space. We get our first spaceship model shot. We get our first alien culture. I mean, I'm not including the Daleks in that because they're a bit one note.
Yeah.
It's the first time we hear something about Gallifrey. We get Susan's description. And I didn't look very hard to check if this was a first, but the Doctor just produces a piece of chalk from his pockets because the plot needs him to. So is this the first time that the Doctor's pockets are just producing whatever item is necessary without a moment's hesitation? And yeah, it's not the first time an off-screen adventure is mentioned because of the planet Quinnis.
Yes.
Comes before this, but this peppering of like, I've been here, I've done this is like that other time, it really ramps up. Yeah, in all kinds of ways, this becomes the imprint, I think, for a vast chunk of Doctor Who in the future. But it's interesting you ask about what state was the show in, because it was in a transient position of waiting to see if they were going to be renewed. They were planning to see what might happen. They didn't have the studio space they wanted. They were asking for more studio space, and Sidney Newman said, if Doctor Who can't be done properly, let's cancel it. So they were initially offering it Lime Grove Studio G for the Sensorites, and the sets weren't going to fit. So there's all this turmoil, and the actors were in states of contract expiry and all of these situations. They were considering trying to split the recording of each episode across 2 days to try and give the cast some respite, but Verity said it's just logistically going to be even more expensive and more time consuming. So there was all of this turmoil going on behind the scenes. So it's a really interesting thing that we have this little summary of how did we get here and how are we doing. Let's give ourselves a little review and remind the audience.
It's odd. It feels like it should be after Doctor Who's taking its first little break or something like that.
Well, this was the
almost
thing
feels like it was planned, and then strangely enough, we actually do get the first transmission break completely randomly in the middle of the run, don't we?
Yeah, it was originally at one point going to be a season finale, and then they moved the goalpost, and then they pre-filmed the next block, and there was a lot of moving things around at this point.
But as Rick said, and I'm really pleased he said it because I was thinking the same, it does very much feel like, amongst all this turmoil, which you've just educated me about, it does feel like the third phase to me, where you've got the first dozen episodes or so, which are, let's throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah. Then
a reprieve where they start, having slightly lavish more adventures, but you haven't quite got the gist of where it's going. And then this one, just as you both said, lays it out for the future. It doesn't feel like it's a TV show on the ropes at all. It feels confident, and as you said, Gav, it's defining the characters in the mould that they will take. I do wonder, though, I don't know whether this is the right time to bring it up, it probably isn't, but whether the Doctor having more involvement and having more agency and being proactive in dealing with the problems is by virtue of where the rest of the cast are at or what they're doing. Because you've got Barbara on the sunbed on the rocket for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
She was in a smelly flat in Mallorca watching the Sensorites.
And then they take the unusual decision of sidelining the hero, Ian, with the poisoning, and so who's left? You know, you've got Susan or the Doctor, and it's Susan's most involved story, because she had a break in the previous one, and it's definitely the first time the Doctor, you know, is the main protagonist out of the crew rather than Ian.
It's interesting.
So it's interesting.
Just looking at when this was commissioned, and apparently Newman, Peter R, and Whittaker were discussing. It's a shame we don't have Simon around to give his insight, but they were discussing this in January, February 1964, and outlining it, and then commissioned it late in February. And so this is possibly the first story that was commissioned like post Daleks, and when they suddenly really knew they had a hit on their hand, and that they'd had one thing that had possibly helped shape, you know, that. You know, I wonder whether it's possibly that they were looking and they were thinking, okay, this works, everyone loves this, so let's have, you know, so that's now shaping how they're thinking about carrying it forward.
There's basically no paperwork on this. I did touch base with Simon just to see if he had any under his mattress. But yeah, we've got commissioning dates and delivery dates, and that's it. There's no insight into what discussions were had, whose ideas were whose, and how much rewriting was done or not.
I did see some note on the production subtitles about it being referred to as the mind control story or something at a fairly early stage in planning.
Oh, okay.
I think, but
it had a different working title, Giles. What was that?
Sorry?
It had a different working title.
Ooh, that I don't know.
Something to do with Mind Probe. Then you can disagree with me in the time-honored tradition.
No, not the Mind Probe. I did see that somewhere on the internet. Yeah, I agree.
What I really love about it, and I am more and more coming to realise that the Hartnell era is my absolute favourite. But what I love about it, which I didn't used to love, is the sort of wide-eyed naivety that now we're on a spaceship. What could it, you know, we're on something that's moving. What could it possibly be? And you get that feel as well in the Ark, which I have less time for, where we're on a spaceship. Wow. And it's tempting to think they do it all the time in Doctor Who, but they don't. But it does seem a bit naive. But you've got to put yourself in the position of a 7-year-old child watching this in 1964, and it might be a little bit special. I don't know. I'm not well up enough on my sci-fi and timings of various TV shows, but it's not Flash Gordon. This is sci-fi. Keys of Marinus is Flash Gordon, isn't it? But yeah, I love that. I love that it's a big deal for the show to be doing this for the first time, and just that fact is enough that they consider it to wow the audience at the time. I really enjoyed that.
I liked there's one of the themes of the show, and you talk about that naivety of why could we be moving when they land?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is the script does a good job a number of times of allowing the child, or frankly the grown-up these days for me, the chance to guess things. And almost being participants in the program by saying, I know the answer to this. They do it with the elimination of all things but the water later on. It's that bringing the audience into the show, and it's clever that way, and I enjoy it for it.
Yeah. There's a lot of breadcrumbs and there's a lot of signposting.
Yes, it's interesting because it feels like a very low-powered cliffhanger, considering that was the cliffhanger out of the Aztecs. Was we've landed, but we're still moving. Yeah, it feels slightly odd, but yeah, with that sort of early sci-fi kind of feel to it. So these aren't familiar concepts necessarily.
And then for a story which is, before we rip it to shreds, for a story, I jest, I love it. For a story that has a relatively low regard, a muted regard in fandom, it's got 2 Zinger quotes in it, which are still used to this day. You know, it's got the Susan talking about Gallifrey, which made a reappearance in A Tenant, and it's got the for what started out as a mild curiosity in a junkyard, this has turned into quite a great spirit of adventure, which is magic.
There's a few
Love it.
fun bits of dialogue in this. There's a little joke that gets lost where there's a comment about John having white hair, and the doctor says, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I would love to know who wrote what. I hesitate to make this a criticism because I think the programme is and always has been varied. But if we assume that it's mostly Peter R. Newman's own hand, it just feels pitched fractionally too young. It doesn't quite hide the mysteries enough. But maybe the likes of the Daleks is pitching it too high in the opposite direction. But then, it all averages out, I guess. I just think that some of the mysteries are too well signposted. But then I don't know that I thought that when I read the book, which is probably when I was closer to the main target audience, or at least the low to middle end of the target audience. It's hard to say.
What struck me about this is that there's quite a lot of nuance in the storytelling. I mean, the goodies aren't all good and the baddies aren't all bad, and it sort of feels like we're quite used to that in the historicals, but we don't tend to get it so much in the sci-fi. In the sci-fi, particularly you think the Daleks and maybe parts of Key Submarinus as well, it feels like you've got a race that's entirely bad and a race that's entirely good. Whereas in this, it's definitely pointing out that people are complex and flawed. So I would agree with you that some of those things that could have been drawn out a bit further are resolved quite quickly. But nonetheless, I like those character points.
Yeah, I was reflecting on just quite how much depth there is to the various subplots, the Sensorites. I don't know if we're all familiar with Peter R. Newman's other notable work, which was Yesterday's Enemy, which was a Hammer horror film. Well, it was originally a 1958 BBC TV production, and then Peter Newman adapted it into a play, and then they picked up the rights for the film. But it's about people at war and who good versus evil, and it's not that straightforward, and making tough decisions behind enemy lines. And there's some interesting bits lifted out thematically from this war film. I liked the fact that the Sensorites' motivations are set out very clearly, very early on, that they are essentially an invaded or a potentially invaded culture, and they've perceived a threat. They got this psychic warning of what was going to happen, and they're protecting their world. It's completely reasonable how they're behaving, but added to that, they're not prepared to kill. They put people on ice, and then they're basically preparing a human zoo for them to live out their lives. And it struck me as interesting when they said basically that they couldn't send them home after what they had discovered, and they would have to keep hold of them. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because that's exactly how Doctor Who started out, when Ian and Barbara discovered the TARDIS.
Good point.
And the Doctor says, well, I can't let them go. They've just got to be prisoners here with me, with us. So that was a neat little parallel. But I really liked how developed that motive was for the city administrator as a really effective villainous character with a completely sympathetic motivation. And yes, he is moustache twirling, but he's completely reasonable. The humans' intents are very negative, very exploitative, and his pretty xenophobic feelings are fairly well justified, because the humans actually are hiding out in the mountains and poisoning them all to death. So he's not being paranoid either.
Yeah.
He's a really good character for a fellow in a rubber mask. It's good stuff.
But it's exactly the same as Quetzalcoatl in the Aztecs.
True.
who you despise when you're watching, but all of his motives I'm sympathetic to. He's the one who's calling them out, in the correct way. And you're on the side of the Doctor and co, who are trying to con the Aztecs into various untruths. Yeah, it's really interesting what you say there, Gav. I think my issue is, I think all of that works. I think it's all very good, and I did find myself watching and sympathising with the villain. But I think my problem dramatically with it is that the Sensorites are taken out at the knees as a sort of physical threat right away. And I just don't think that's good for drama. There's no threat associated with them as the aliens, and it doesn't quite work as compelling as you could have made them a little bit more threatening for longer. But where you end up with, and what you've just surmised, is very modern Doctor Who, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's very modern.
The first episode, in fact, more episode 2, is shot like a horror movie, and it's really effective and suspenseful. And the one of the notes I put down was, it's a real shame that they had that one bit of dialogue early on between the two Sensorites, because it's really unnerving, despite the fact they're just, no offense, bald fellas walking around in the dark. It's just really unnerving, the way it's shot and the way they just creep around. But that little conversation they have sets it back a little bit. But I like the shift as soon as they start talking and negotiate. They make first contact and they have a chat with them, and they discover that the power balance shifts really easily when they are able to exploit their weaknesses. And so the Sensorites, on the one hand, are holding all this power over them technologically, and then the Doctor and co are just using brute force, sort of elemental force, the darkness and the voice and the loudness of the voice, to overcome this technological threat. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would have done much else except just have them creepier for longer.
It trips itself up as well a little in the plotting of episode 1, doesn't it? Because you have the Sensorite appear, you have the hands, the gloved hands appearing to burn out the TARDIS lock, and then the big reveal at the end is the brilliant shot of the Sensorite rising up at the window. And I haven't quite got it clear in my mind whether the plot makes it clear that there are Sensorites already on board, and
there appear to be 2 of them. They suggest there's 2 of them coming to the ship.
Yeah,
and yet we've already seen that there's definitely.
So when they were already on board, when you know they're already on board, that cliffhanger at the end of episode 1 is basically them being dicks. Okay, I'm going to scare you at the window, but we're already on board,
I liked the bait and switch as well, when you're waiting for the next moment of suspense of the Sensorites threatening Barbara and Susan, and then it turns out that it's a human hand, and it's a spooky fella, and then it just I like how layered it is. It just keeps quite a lot of Doctor Who just dumps idea after idea after idea, but this is actually structured. It's like someone sat down and thought of a story and threaded all the.
It's full of stuff. It's full of things which are slightly unevenly pasted throughout, but every episode has its own thing going on. I really enjoy it.
But they all pay off as well. It's because quite often, I mean, there's plenty of Doctor Who's you could pick, but there's City of Death, just to pick a random example, as a consequence of an inordinate number of rewrites. There's loads of setups that go absolutely nowhere because they are remnants of an earlier story. But this, all of the little signposts, there's loads of foreshadowing, whether it's heavy-handed or not, or a little too child-friendly. But they talk about the missing people, and then the virus, or the people start dying, and they talk about the guy who's the mineralogist, and he's the one that went mad. So it sets up the idea that mineralogy is the source of the contention, and all these little all these little bits that some of which don't get picked up for 4 or 5 episodes. It's
And I think this is why what you've explained there is why I think it works reasonably well as a 6-parter. There are far more 6-parters in Doctor Who that run out of steam when they have a formulaic way of producing those episodes. Here, I think they just layer in enough to keep that going through that 6 episodes. And in fact, I've possibly watched Sensorites 4 times, maybe. The reveal of the humans in the caves kind of catches me by surprise.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, wow, just when I thought, oh, have I got another episode of this internal politics and trying to work out what's wrong with the aqueduct, something arrives just to freshen us up through to the finish line. So for me, I'm quite happy with it as a 6-parter.
Yeah, it keeps moving. Like you say, it's got 2 episodes on board the spaceship. You then go down to the planet. There's plenty of scenes in the middle episodes that, whereas other stories might have run on a bit too long, it intercuts between the protagonists and the antagonists, each wending their way through their own situations. And I really enjoyed how unsettling it is that the Doctor and co are all doing their best and being nice and hanging out with the top Sensorite. But behind the scenes, you've got the city administrator who's plotting and manoeuvring and doing villainous things. And they work really nicely in parallel, but they break up the action really well as well. And there's quite a lot of Doctor Who's that just follow the main cast, and they never step out of that. And I think they can feel a little bit more long-winded for that reason. But then, as you say, well, before we get to the aqueduct, you've got the resolution of the story with John, but then that leads to the other little subplot where they try to frame the Doctor, and then you get to the aqueduct in the final episode. It's always moving and it's always changing, and it surprises me that this is sort of offhandedly labelled as boring, which I think it quite often is. Because
one thing that slightly got to me on that with the administrator was I thought it slightly falls into the trap of what some people have said about the Silurians. Like it's like an ongoing serial. What dastardly plot will the city administrator get up to this week?
Yeah, but it is though, isn't it? It's a weekly adventure serial.
Yeah, in order to discredit our heroes.
Yeah, I kind of felt when I was watching that it could have managed without the. I absolutely understand what you're saying, Gav, about, or whoever said it, about the internecine arguing, and dramas do that to stretch things out. You couldn't make Secret Army if all the Nazis were all, Nazis. You had to have some fighting in there between them to be able to draw it out. But I think there's so much in the Sensorites. I found myself a bit conflicted, not totally resolved on the matter whether you needed that, because you end up with this sash thing, which I'm not gonna kick it because it's an easy thing to kick. But then if you didn't have the sash thing and that plotting, you wouldn't have what I thought was a really delightful resolution to that, which was the Doctor was in his coat. He wasn't wearing his coat. No, he was in his cloak. I really got a little buzz out of that, and I felt that was paying it off. But I didn't feel it was necessary this time, because I think you could have made more of the first half. I got a bit frustrated where the cliffhanger to episode 2 is Susan saying, "I'm going down to the planet." And that's a terrific cliffhanger. So we've had 2 terrific cliffhangers. So I found it really frustrating that she didn't actually, she hadn't gone by that point.
Yeah.
We hung around in the ship for a bit more.
Yeah.
And he had the Doctor 1 foot away from her, shouting at her to come here, and that was confusing.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel it needed that. So I personally felt that because it's got that sash thing in, which I don't know what you guys think, but I don't enjoy that particular thing. I feel that is a part of the, I think Gav said it, the over deliberate spelling out of what's happening all the time. I just felt it could have done without that. But I love the relish that they have to resolve all of that situation and catch out the bad guys. I do enjoy that. So I'm a bit conflicted about it.
Yeah, and it certainly takes the debating and the squabbling of a local community. It provides it in a much more interesting way. I was thinking of Carnival of Monsters and the tribunal in there, which is so tedious. And if there wasn't all the action adventure wrapped around it in terms of the miniscope, Carnival of Monsters, could be an appalling watch. I'd much rather have the Sensorites and their intrigue and their debating in the style that's presented in the Sensorite story than I would the kind of that approach that's taken sometimes in later Who, like Carnival of Monsters, in terms of how to present an alien society debating a situation. So another positive for me in terms of the Sensorites.
I mean, it feels with the sashes, it feels like it's a bit racist, right? They all look the same. So the only way we're going to be able to tell them apart is that they've got sashes. Except it turns out they can't tell each other apart either.
No. I think this has been misrepresented over the years. Because the city administrator is when, what's her name, Carol, she says, I can't tell you apart without your sashes. And the city administrator's like, oh, can't you, you massive racist? As you say, to her, it's not that they can't tell each other apart. He says, oh, I'd never thought, because he's perceiving through her eyes for the first time. And as Tim said, that then gets turned on its head, because then they say, well, how did you recognise the Doctor? And they said, well, because of his clothes. The inference being you all look the same. If we give you a cloak, that's how we recognise you. But the only other thing is they say two things. They say that the leaders are not seen by the populace, so most people don't know what their faces look like. And the city administrator says, how would you recognise me at a distance? And the guy says, well, because you got your sash on. It's no sillier than like the Master putting the costume of a general on and walking through the base in the Sea Devils, and everyone goes, oh, he's got a general's coat on. We've never seen his face before, but he must be a general. It's the same, Football commentators know who the footballers are because they've got their names on their backs. I think the nuance of that little moderately silly. What I do object to, I'll give the sashes a pass. I can't forgive the evil administrator who stops doing his evil voice to disguise himself. Because he gets challenged and he's going, I put my terrible plans into operation. And he goes, oh, hello, boss. And he suddenly stops. Hello. Yeah. I don't have to do this voice all the time, Bloody evil voice that I do, just to be evil. Yeah, that's worse. I can't negotiate my way around that.
Again, shades of the Ark with Dodo berating the monoid.
You gave yourself away there, didn't you? No. No.
Do you think the Sensorites noticed that each of their beards was stuck on differently?
Yeah.
Well, that's the irony.
Gav, are you going to defend that?
You can quite clearly tell them apart.
Yes, exactly.
How their faces are fitted on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but by the end, one of them has just got a gaping mouth slit.
Well, I can't decide whether or not it matters, whether or not we're supposed to be able to see their upper lip or not. Yeah. I don't know, because it's, as you say, it's so clear by the end that I don't know if the intention is that we're never meant to see the bottom of that mask, or
well, look at the start. I can't say I've memorised all 5 Sensorite beards, but at the start they are definitely more upcombed to cover the mouths. And I think I wasn't actively tracking Sensorite beards, because that'd be the sort of thing that you would do, Gav. You'd do a website about it and say that's Sensorite too. But this is the weirdest thing I'm ever going to say in a podcast. I've trailered it quite heavily on Twitter, so I think the payoff is going to be slight. But the upbrushed beard is exactly the same beard that Dick Van Dyke has in his episode of Columbo. His beard is extremely strange. There was an uncanny element to, and then if you Google Dick Van Dyke Columbo, he's wearing a blue shirt with a Sensorite beard, and yeah, that was one of my major takeaways. And I thought that was content worthy.
I don't know if I'd ever noticed before. You've got big pointy ears.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever registered, but I think because they hide them with their hair, and also they try to not shoot them from the side because you can see where the mask stops. But yeah, they got big Vulcan little giant pictures.
And so does Dick Van Dyke.
Peter Glazer's got a sort of a Trumpian quiff as well. Giles, you've been trying to say something, I think, for the last 10 minutes.
Well,
Better be good.
Well, two things. One is I'm not sure who did the DVD notes, but they at least toy with the idea that the whole identikit, Sensorite, mistaken identity thing is a deliberate. He's sort of pastiching communist China and Red Scare stuff, and there may be a influence from the Manchurian candidates and things like that. And so there's a deliberate thing of, that the Sensorites are a bit like the Chinese, and even the suggestion that the spaceship being held in orbit is a reference to the Yangtze incident, famous film with Hartnell.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was actually going to say that was of more significance is I like that bit with the reveal about the Doctor's coat/cloak thing. And what I don't quite get is why that isn't, because that's just dealt with in order to reveal the treachery of the city administrator's henchman. And considering the city administrator himself he's completely written off screen.
Yes.
It seems like, well, hang on, why didn't you use that to, that would be the clever reveal, and that could have been his comeuppance at that point, because you don't really need him.
Do you not think it's more enjoyable to ratchet up his villainy by him surviving these moments? Because what I loved about that scene is that you think he's going to get his comeuppance, and then he throws his mate under the bus, and then you get this really beautifully uncomfortable moment where Susan and whoever else it is then recommends him for promotion on the basis of how great he's been. Yeah. And we're privy to this information of him being a dick, and they're elevating him into an even more powerful position. And I really enjoyed that, and I would keep that. What I wouldn't keep, and I don't know if this is one of your rewrites, Tim, or I would space apart the setting up and the foiling of his plans so that they're separated by more than 5 seconds. Because the note is probably the worst example, because it again is a really unsettling bit where they write the note about I've gone back to the ship, and you're like, oh no, how are they going to get out of this one? And then they get out of this.
Yeah.
I was quite relieved by that's the kidnap plot, isn't it? And I have to say, having not seen this for a few years, when I saw that the episode was called Kidnap. Is it called Kidnap?
Yes.
Yeah. My heart sank because I thought it was the one with. I thought Susan was about to get kidnapped for 2 episodes or something like that, and I realised I'm mixing that up with That Happens in Keys of Marinus.
Oh yes.
So I was quite relieved that this was a fairly brief kidnapping subplot for Carol.
Well, I mean, it's so brief, isn't it, that it's sort of about 24 minutes and 20 seconds into a 25-minute episode, or something like that.
Yeah,
it's interesting that Barbara's holiday to Mallorca was actually used in the resolution of that plot, because she was being brought down from the spaceship, and she said, I mean, I don't know why she thinks that she would have been able to detect the passing of another spaceship, but there you go. But it actually came into play in some useful manner.
Was it interested by Barbara's absence, in that we've had absences before in season 1, and I haven't really missed those characters. I really missed Barbara going around.
Exactly, and I think that's why it sags for me just slightly in those 2 episodes. I love Barbara. She is incredibly ill-treated, I think, generally, and forgotten about. I've said it before, but there was a 50th anniversary interview on Radio 4, I think, with William Russell, Caroline Ford, and they maybe mentioned her once in this 30-minute, hour-long special, and I'm a huge fan of Barbara. I think she just adds such humanity to it all, and adds all of that, or makes it easier to suspend your disbelief, because she interacts so well with all of the situations, and I really missed her. And then you've got, I mentioned earlier, you've got Ian largely sidelined for a chunk of it as well, and I found myself missing those two key characters. But Barbara, I love Barbara. She is tremendous.
And she arrives like a train in that final episode. Within seconds, she's identified the plotting
and lifts it.
She's effective in dealing with the first leader. She identifies what actions are going to be taken, and effectively leads the solution in a story where the Doctor is, for most of it, put up as the person who is solving everything. He dives into the tunnels, and who's there as effectively the leader of that group is Barbara. Brilliant. Love her.
Yeah.
The only positive out of it is Susan gets time to breathe, and it's probably the least I hate Susan in any story.
Yeah.
She's not horribly whiny. She's not stupid. The confrontation where she defies the Doctor's really engaging. She gets this power. She's representing the TARDIS crew on a way that gives her something to do. Yeah, and she just really benefits from a bit of additional writing and no overshadowing from, as you say, the likes of Ian and Barbara.
Does make you wonder, was Eve with her?
It does, but I think even given her time to shine in this story, it never quite convinces. She gets forced back into the kind of sulky teenager role at a point where, as you say, Gav, she takes the lead in the ship. She says, I'm the one who can telepathically communicate. I'm going to represent us. I'm going to take control of this situation. And only 2-3 episodes later, the Doctor is effectively squabbling with her like she's a naughty toddler, and that did a disservice to her in the one opportunity that she has to grow as a character. And it was still a missed opportunity for me.
I very much enjoyed her speech at the end, telling the other Sensorites that people are generally horrible. You shouldn't trust anyone. The world is full of unpleasant people, and don't go around blindly putting your faith in people. You've got to be more suspicious. And I think that's the true Doctor Who ethos.
Yeah.
I like that the Sensorites are, they're nice hosts. They give him nice food to eat. He even brings out the special water. Not quite fast enough, but he does it. They're a bit kind of 1950s landlady, though, because when John's not very well and Carol wants to go and be with him, so they say to her, you'll be given a room near him, because they're not married yet.
No funny business on the Sensphere.
Absolutely not.
No hanky-panky on the Sensphere.
John and Carol, my God, they are sitcom romance to a T, aren't they? They follow that. Round the Horn was very good at lampooning these things at a similar era, where just characters at the time would just go, "Oh, Carol," "Oh, John." Oh, Carol. That counted for a romantic conversation. And they simper away at it to a T for far more episodes than I could quite stomach.
Do you mind terribly, terribly?
Yes. Oh, Carol.
Like the parody at the beginning of the Armageddon Factor.
Oh, yes, yeah. Talking of which, not that sitcom reference, but it's interesting because when the crewmen from the original ship, the Earthmen, turn up at the end, I know we get old Waterfield.
Yeah, yes.
In an early pre of the Dalek's appearance. He's rather good.
Yes.
And that feels like, as much as yes, they have the tension of other monsters in the aqueducts thing. It also feels like they could have made a bit more of that by bringing it a bit, because apparently this was also one of the, at least alleged to be one of the key inspirations behind it, was the idea of inspired by the idea of Japanese soldiers on remote islands who didn't know the war was over or carried on fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so this.
Well, it was loosely similar to the Yesterday's Enemy film.
Yeah.
In that regard, they were poisoning the water, beavering away like a Japanese prisoner.
Yeah, and it's quite funny because there's a lovely comic moment, the bit where the Doctor spots one, the crewman, and Ian spots the other one, and they don't realise that there's another one in the other direction. they both turn
That's
around.
really nicely shot.
It's quite it's quite
Yeah.
It's quite
Depth of field.
You can imagine Troughton and Jamie doing that when I
Frank
say
Cox,
and
it was interesting comparing and contrasting the two directorial styles. There's not much in it, but I think Frank Cox does more depth of field, whereas Mervyn Pinfield tends to be more left to right. But Pinfield's stuff was, I think, more technically ambitious. I noted the number of line fluffs went up in episodes 5 and 6. It seemed massively under-rehearsed, and I don't know whether that was attributable to Frank Cox. But all of the
That
famous
was a high starting point, though, Gav. Because it's quite throughout.
But all the famous, I hear him over talking, and all of the famous line fluffs are bar 1 or 2. They're all in episodes 5 and 6, and I found that quite interesting.
I think one of the challenges for the two directors is how tremendously inactive this story is. And, I love those character option action figures, but the idea that they're Sensorites were action figures is really stretching it on the box. And as a director, that must be terribly difficult if you've literally just got static figures on a set. You could have really worked that bit harder. And again, I think there was an opportunity, whether it was with the humans who are discovered in the caves towards the end, to inject some real movement into the piece. It's remarkably resilient how stationary everything is for 6 whole episodes.
I'll take your character options, Sensorite, and raise you fine art castings somewhere in the loft.
Ooh,
I'm sure I've got one of those from the 1980s. I don't know why I collected them, because they were.
But that really didn't move, Richard.
It was very realistic.
There was at least articulation claimed in the character options one.
It does make you think, though, like talking about the small TV studios and the restrictions that they're under, and that there is a particular, we made reference to it before, there was a very incongruous bit in episode 2 episode 3, where they are, the dialogue indicates they're 10 or 20 feet apart.
Yes.
But in reality, on that set, they've got 3 feet. They could reach out and touch each other.
Yeah.
And like you say, the Doctor's shouting, "Come back over here," and Susan just moves about 3 inches.
Well, there's also
There's stuff in the tunnels as well, where you kind of imagine that if this was a different world where they had more money and bigger sets, that you would have you would have a big chase scene, or maybe if they'd done some pre-filming or something like that, you would have a lot more movement. Tim?
But they're in a big studio this time. They're in Television Centre.
they are for episodes 2 and 3 at least. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in relative terms,
Yeah.
you've got the TARDIS set and the spaceship set and the Sensorite set. You can't have like a quarter of a mile of tunnels to run through, which you could if you went on location and had someone in the far distance.
Yeah.
I was genuinely impressed with the sense of scale in the set in episodes 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Because Ian and Barbara, I think, are creeping through. Ian is waving open the inexplicably above head height door openers. But you got a real sense of scale with that ship, connected rooms. And then, I can almost map it out. That they go through the circular
Go on,
door, and then down a corridor, and then they turn, does the inexplicable hand wavy thing, turns right into another room where they get to what they're doing. In that final room, there's a really wobbly panel with a hand obviously holding it steady. But yeah, I was really impressed with the sense of scale and the design.
I was wondering whether the
by
plans.
what's his face.
And are there any floor plans for this one still around?
I don't think so. No.
Because it would be.
Nothing in the early years. No,
Oh.
okay.
Well, it was Cusick did it. Cusick designed it, didn't he? That's a good point. Because
Yeah.
it is interesting because the first episode's got that very nice shot, which I think was the first time they did that, where they walk out through the TARDIS straight onto the spaceship flight deck, and then the second. So apparently, what did they say? Episodes 2 through 5. It says it said 2 through 5, which would include one of Frank Cox's. But apparently, they were all planned out so they could be shot and intended to be shot in one take, or like one block with no recording breaks at all. It didn't end up that way in practice. There ended up being a few, but they were all basically shot that way. And apparently, they laid out for episode 2. Essentially, they just had one interconnected set, and they were pretty much shooting the whole thing as a play on the one set that really did follow the layout of the spaceship, because that's the only set they had for that entire episode, which is interesting because it would be interesting to see the reconstruction of that, like how it was.
Yeah. I think my one regret with the design is in episode 1 where Maitland is sat at a panel and it just looks quite cheap. But if you look at the set photographs in colour, those what look like rather anachronistic glass bulbs are bright orange, and the panels on the controls behind are all lit in yellows and ambers, and it's really nice. And the greys are really dark grey, and the blues are really rich dark blue. So I'm not a colorization fan, but I'd love to have seen this in colour rather than black and white. It's one of the only instances where I felt, I'd love to see this in colour, just to give it a bit more. So yeah, I'm a fan of the design. It's just a shame the black and whiteness loses some of that whizzy-wazziness of the colours that were there.
Yeah. There's nothing in the early years. There's a couple of photographs of some Sensorites, and that's it. So no plan, sadly.
Okay.
One other little negative for me
Yeah.
was the music.
Mm.
We're in the era of music concrete, and if there's one story that's going to lend itself to ethereal electronic music or music created with glass tubes or whatever, it's this one. And instead you get what sounds like library music, but isn't. It's specially composed for this sort of adventure serial, melodramatic-y, orchestral music. And I found that quite jarring because I just thought it was stock music, and I want to hear weird alien music concrete type stuff. So apologies, Norman Kay, who went to my school.
It feels quite Edge of Destruction in that kind of episodes 1 and 2 in that regard. I mean, you haven't got a huge giant pair of scissors, but apart from that, there's quite a lot of similar sort of slightly overacted, slightly overdramatic here and there.
I don't know whether it's just very similar, but it sounds like at least one piece is reused from the Cavemen episodes.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Quatermass then, because there's a particular bit which is quite Quatermassy.
Well, I know they recorded 22 minutes of new stuff, but unless it's just a one-trick pony and it all sounds exactly the same, I was sure that it was all recycled from the Cave of Skulls and such like. But then I looked it up and it was 22 minutes of specially composed Sensorites music. So it's I don't know. I don't know whether I would feel differently if I didn't so strongly associate it with the Cavemen. But yes, it is a bit generic.
Does anyone know who the Sensorite is in the aqueduct? Because just at the start of episode 5, is it? You get a sight of a Sensorite in the aqueduct, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, we've been told that the Sensorites don't ever go in the aqueduct. So what's one doing down there? The Doctor's sort of, he's got his tattered coat and
So eavesdropping.
Ian's helping him out.
Mm.
Yeah, and maybe it's.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it's brief. Isn't it meant to be the administrator's henchman, or
Could be. It feels like it's not quite explained, but yeah. But I think that's what would make sense if it's a henchman working for the administrator, but obviously a slightly braver Sensorite than most.
I really enjoyed watching it. I really got into it. I found myself thinking I've got to take this one episode at a time, and I didn't. I watched two, and then I watched another, and then I watched another, and then I watched another, and I did it in not quite one solid sitting, but with little breaks in between. I loved watching it. I love early Doctor Who. It's just the best.
I mean, as I said, my Mallorca serialized viewing massively improved my feelings on it, which were not negative, but I didn't think very strongly about it after the UK Gold. And then watching it again for this, it went up even more in my estimations. And it's strange because, I'm not blind to some of its faults, but I don't think they define it overall.
No.
So it confounds me a little bit that it's not well liked, because I thoroughly enjoy watching The Chase, but I know that it's terrible, and that doesn't. I can be completely objective about that. But when I watched this again, thinking most people think this is rubbish, I sat there thinking I can't really work out why. I mean, yes, there's some sort of facile reasons. Some of the dialogue exposition is a bit clunky, but this is not an exceptional thing. Yes, some of the science is a bit off here and there, but historical or technical details have not generally defined people's love of us. We don't lambast Marco Polo for having an anachronistic map, or whether condensation would really form in the TARDIS. These are not reasons to hate Marco Polo. So whether or not some of the science is off in the Sensorites, I don't think it's a very strong reason to
definitely got a few
push
bits
6
of
episodes.
it's definitely got a few bits of the mission to educate thing going on there, hasn't it? Though
This came at a time.
The spectrograph. There's
Sidney Newman had just sent out a memo to the BBC production office, to Doctor Who, in fact, saying that he wanted stories to emphasise science more, and specifically engineering. He said there need to be more engineers in the UK, so we would like to write more prominent engineering material into Doctor Who. Now, whether or not the fact that they put an engineer in the Sensorites and he was a villain fulfills this criterion, I don't know. But there's certainly, it's certainly a stab at proper science fiction.
Yeah. For me, there are many reasons to really like the Sensorites. It rattles along as a 6-parter. It neatly breaks itself into those 3 sequences where it does some horror and suspense. It does some internal politics and world building and a bit of conspiracy. It does that sort of more yesterday's enemy type finale with the humans who don't know the war has ended. It's got real opportunities for the Doctor to do something different and really take a lead in an episode and involve himself in the solution. As we say, Susan gets to shine a little bit. There's the context of it in season 1. It's hard to pass on the Sensorites as being anything other than a great story, but at a really critical point in Doctor Who's history, an early history. You wouldn't want to skip this in a pilgrimage of Doctor Who, because I think it's a really important story and an enjoyable story.
Well said.
Yeah. So I mean, I trailed at the start that I didn't have the journey I was expecting. I mean, I'd remembered it as having a strong first episode and then falling away, which was, so I enjoyed the start that you talked about, Rick. The recap. Then I was very impressed by that shot that Tim you'd stuck up on Twitter the other day of the sort of pan out of the control
we've not
room
that.
into the ship. I mean, that's very nice. But then, to be honest, the rest of episodes 1 and 2, it was starting to flag a bit, and I thought, oh golly, if this is the high point, what's the rest of it going to be like? But actually, when they got down to the sense sphere, I suddenly it kicked up for me, and I actually rather enjoyed 4 episodes of the plotting and scheming, and this time round, I warmed to it, and the thing I came out of it feeling was, I think we get the Sensorites we deserve, because if you want to see boom mics in shot, if you want to hear fluffed lines, and you want to see dodgy costumes that don't quite work and so on, well, I mean, they're all there, absolutely present and correct. You're quite right. Well done. Yeah, absolutely, that's there. But if you're open to watching a nuanced story where the goodies aren't all good and the baddies aren't all bad, and there's good motivation, as we've discussed, for what everyone's doing, then you've got that too. So really, you choose what what you want to be watching. But I think it turns out to be quite a strong story.
I just had a thought.
Yeah,
I wouldn't cut it down from 6. I'd probably extend it by 1.
Okay.
Because halfway through episode 1, there is a cliffhanger there where it's shades of Revenge of the Cybermen, where the rocket is hurtling towards the planet.
Yeah.
And they steer it away. And that just feels like a cliffhanger. Boom. And then you've got a really good cliffhanger where the Sensorite appears, trolling them because there's already one on board. But I would have liked to have seen more of that psychological drama of John stalking them around the rocket, because that could have been drawn out. Is it a Sensorite stalking them? Is it John stalking them? And I think you actually could have got another episode of that.
Yeah.
And it's so crammed full, those 2 episodes, that it becomes almost wasteful, I think, in moments of drama. And that might rebalance it a little. Anyway, just a thought. Just playing with it. It doesn't need rewriting because it's great. Apart from the sashes.
I love the bit where the city administrator gets promoted, and he's just standing there stroking his sash, stroking his new sash.
Yeah. He's only had the collar up till now. Yeah.
So that's when he says to Ian, "You call me sir."
Yeah.
And Ian looks at the camera like, "What have I done?"
Yeah.
For me, on this rewatch, he's one of the best villains.
Yeah.
At the 60s, he's so good.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of General Carrington vibes coming out of him.
He's just doing his moral duty.
Because that scene where he's interrogating, where he has the guy with the firing key.
Yeah.
And that poor Sensorite, and he's like, "I'm not going to do it. I've got your kids, Dan." and then that poor guy bends the firing pin, and he gets killed.
Yeah.
That was quite affecting, that scene.
Yeah.
I had a little cry.
We should probably have had a moment's silence for him. Yeah.
So for Gav, it's Marvick Chen, Tobias Vaughan, and the Sensorites.
Top tier.
Yeah.
Top tier city administrator.
Yeah. I do love Hartnell in this story. That I think we've said it already, but it does feel like he becomes quite authoritative, and he kind of relaxes into that kind of role of being in charge and driving the plot, and he seems to be enjoying it. So I like that aspect. And there's one brilliant line. It made me laugh. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're thinking about, but he says something. He's talking about molybdenum, and he says it's a veritable gold mine down there.
Or a molybdenum mine.
Molybdenum.
Well, it is. Yeah.
Despite some fluffing, the camera seems to love him in this episode, though. He looks fierce when it's just his sort of shoulder and head shots, and there's 2 or 3 of those over the course of the Sensorites. And, I think if you're, again, looking at it through a child's eyes, those burning eyes, the shock of white hair, a person far older than you could even imagine, just driving forward a point of view, just must look spectacular on the screen. And I felt that way, like I say, 2 or 3 times watching the Sensorites. Really good. Heartful episode, and Gav, as you say, perhaps a springboard to how the Doctor will be for many, many years after that.
Maitland and Carol don't seem remotely fazed by the fact that the Doctor and his companions are time travellers.
No, that's really what century are you from? Because I kind of inferred, I made up in my own head, that maybe they have sort of cryogenic space programs, and they've been fired out into space over the years, and you thaw out, and you could just turn out to have been from whatever time.
Right.
But I don't know.
I like your theory. It makes more sense than anything else I could come up with.
As if to conclude everything I've got to say about the Sensorites, I've forgotten something about that day when I was laying in my parents' bed.
Oh yeah,
reading these 3 books.
Tell us your pronunciation.
Every time I read the word Sensorites, I pronounced it in my head as Sensorites. Don't know why.
Okay. They're Greek, are they, or something?
Maybe.
With a planet rich in molybdenum. That's how I read.
Right.
Molybdenum. Which isn't it sounds... That doesn't matter.
No, go on.
Nope. Taking that to the grave.
Have you got a physics thing to talk to us about molybdenum, Giles or Gav? No.
Atomic number 42.
Right.
No, that much. Yeah, no, not really. I know that spectrograph seems it's a bit odd. And I suppose someone has to ask, so what's this? And unfortunately, Susan gets the task of asking, because it might have been better. I can't quite remember where Barbara was at the time, but might have been better if Barbara was equipped with asking that, because it should be sort of within Susan's realm of knowledge, you would think, as a character. No, my only remaining things were production related. One of which is just the comments on the very nice montage when they're doing the search for the source of the polluted water, which, considering that was obviously Clive Doig, vision mixing like a demon between with everyone switching around, and because it was obviously done live in the.
Was Clive Doig 12 years old when he worked on Doctor Who, or has he aged phenomenally well?
Picture in the attic job, I reckon.
It's insane.
Well, I saw him at the Riverside last year,
right,
and he looked exactly the same as he did on the DVD, which was made 20 years ago.
Must be in his mid-80s.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a question.
Yeah, because it's 60 years. So yeah.
Well, 1940. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the only other thing that was just a minor query, which is the recap. So they refilmed. They just reacted the first few recaps at least, rather than playing them in on film.
Sensorite looks quite different.
Yes, and I cannot for the life of me work out why, because apparently that was a front projection, back projection of a pre-filmed sequence.
No, who says that? That was a fella outside the window.
Apparently. So it says on the production notes.
Okay, I don't believe it, but
maybe the production notes are wrong, because this is obviously my question is, hang on, so why the hell didn't they just play in, even if they were
it's possible that they decided to check, because it's quite a different look, and it's not the first time they've changed the look of a costume.
Yes.
Between its debut and its full appearance,
I think,
maybe they had a big rethink.
Is it not the second? Is it not the other Sensorite that's on? Is it just not? Don't they just swap Sensorite number 1 for Sensorite number 2, or the two that come aboard?
I thought the hair was combed differently.
I'm sure I've read somewhere that it's a different actor. It's none of the Sensorites or something, because they didn't want to have to employ them for an extra episode or something.
Oh, okay.
because it's the only other thing you've got is a hand, isn't it, in episode 1?
And then they don't cut back. They don't cut back to it. It doesn't do anything else on the screen. You just get that people had the same.
Yeah.
As a quick aside, we talked about episode 2 having a disappointing cliffhanger resolution. I think the Sensorites has really good cliffhangers throughout, but appalling resolutions to every single one of them.
Yeah.
It's staggeringly consistent. Even episode 6, where the Doctor, in a fit of anger, is going to throw Ian out at the next stop. That doesn't happen either.
No.
Yeah.
No, well, maybe he's mollified by being in his favourite period in history.
A thirsty old bugger.
Anything else to say about this one? Only thing I've got was, and I won't dwell on it, was just that I watched the Looking for Peter film on the DVD when I'd watched this. I think we've already teased out anything that was interesting in it, but if you haven't seen it, I'd suggest that it's a nice little film, making some discoveries that were new at the time.
Yeah, I did the same.
Yes, very fond memories of that. Really, really good. Really, really interesting. I'm very sad to hear about his writer's block and untimely demise. But judging by the amount of stuff he crammed into this story, he was certainly certainly capable when he didn't have his block of writing something perfectly toned for Doctor Who. It just everything he might have written might have had flavours of his time in Burma in it. But it's a great documentary. Yeah.
Do you want to have a couple of minutes, get a cup of tea
please.
or something, and then we'll come back and talk about the other one?
Yep.
Lovely.
Okay.
Well, I enjoyed that a great deal. I could have done another half an hour or so on the Sensorites, I think.
Oh, blimey.
Didn't mention Henrik Hirsch. Didn't mention...
Hang on, where does Heinrich Hirsch fit into things?
he did a shot for at the end, at the start of the Reign of Terror.
Did he?
Oh, yeah.
And then went mental.
Yeah.
And then this is the one where Hartnell was perhaps fluffing his lines, I invent, because he was being shadowed on set by the guy who did his jaunty walk in the Reign of Terror.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Proudfoot.
Proudfoot.
Mm.
Yeah. Yep, enjoyed that.
Mm.
Lots of fun.
It's got the 6th highest melting point of any element, according to Wikipedia. Molybdenum.
Mm.
Ratings dipped a little in the middle of this.
Yeah,
it
it
was
did.
still astounding, but it's because of summer sport TV.
middle of
I think a test match and some sort of soccer match. Yeah, and there was a nice weather as well. So the kids were out.
1964 would have been the Australians. It was when Jeff Boycott made his debut
Oh, blimey.
for England.
You get past that.
England actually won the Ashes in 1964. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Who was the captain?
Captain of England
Yeah,
in 64.
Ted Dexter. No?
Could have been. I am slightly younger, so I would have read the Wisdom Book of Test Cricket. That's where I've got that information from. But well, I tell you what, I'm absolutely wrong. Australia won the series 1-0, 4 matches drawn, so it just shows you how much I remember accurately there. Bobby Simpson was Australia's captain, and Ted Dexter was England's captain. Yes. There we go. And this was finishing. Was this sort of June, July time it was on? Because the Lord's Test was the 18th to 23rd of June, and the Leeds Test, Headingley, was in early July. Anyway, that's enough of that.
What happens if I do that? Ah.
I have found the ones from the TARDIS.
I found the slider on QuickTime that means I can hear myself back
No.
about half a second out of sync.
Oh, that's nice.
And which is really useful for completely throwing yourself off your
Brilliant.
yeah,
So,
large lasagna. Yeah, there we go. I'll turn that off, I think. Yes. Wake up in the morning, plate feet and grey head, knowing that every mind can be read. Oh, the Sensorites. And not to Tatwood and or Lawrence Miles for that one.
Damn it! That's the third podcast this week.
Top notch.